Hello. Well, the Canada situation is getting worse, and the Daily Mail is reporting that we're going to be at war on Wednesday. And I'm just going to be talking about a little local issue. Well, you know, there's got to be a limit to the doom and gloom. Mind you, this is going to be pretty gloomy as well. It's about the police calling in on somebody for social media postings. I thought you might be interested in it because it's an interesting story. Before I read it to you, a disclaimer: I don't know this fellow. He could be feeding me a line. The only reason I am reading it to you is I have been involved a couple of years ago now with a similar situation in the Midlands, where a blogger was visited by the police. As a matter of fact, more than visited. Our Nightmare of London sent a police unit up to his house from London to the Midlands, and they knocked down his door and arrested him in front of his 3-year-old child, dragged him off in handcuffs for making social media posts. So I mean, what happened to this fellow is somewhat less severe, and I find it believable. There are a couple of things I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you where he was or his name. I am also, I have missed out a bit of his message because I really can't verify that, and it refers to somebody else, so to a government official. So I'm not going to read that simply because I can't investigate that. But it's an interesting story, and it shows you the state of our police. And it goes like this. In 2018, I decided to put my music online and join the internet age. With the passion of an enthusiast, I joined Facebook and Twitter too. Having studied Islam at university in the 1980s, I have been absorbed in its history and developments ever since. That's sort of interesting because I studied Islam too, but a little bit before the 80s. Having been absorbed, keeping a heads up of all recent academic research and events. And then he says, even at university, I had shared my course with strict Mohammedans. That's interesting. It used to be that English people used to refer to Muslims as Mohammedans. And there's nothing wrong with that, although it sounds strange now. I mean, we refer to followers of Christ as Christians, don't we? So there isn't much of an insult inherent in calling the religion Mohammedanism, but it has become somewhat avoided now for some reason. Anyway, even at university, I shared my course with strict Mohammedans who were quite forward in their enmity towards those who study critically their beliefs. My professor marked my work to such bias. He doesn't tell me what the background of the professor was, so I have no way of knowing this. My professor marked my work to such bias. After an investigation, I had to have my essays marked by, and then he gives a name, another university, that is, not the university that he was attending, an outside work marker or whatever you call it, rather than the university where he was studying. And my warnings went unheeded until he was caught exchanging doctorates for remuneration and eventually dismissed. I am making an assumption about that professor which might be unfair. Anyway, I soon decided to help create a discussion forum for Christians and Mohammedans. We managed a large platform of 80,000 subscribers and moderated one of the most toxic things I've ever been involved in. From the shallowness of debate to hateful threats But that was only to be expected from a global forum. Okay, so yeah, I get some nasty stuff as well. If you're going to put your stuff out through the world, you're going to get some nutcases and fanatics writing in, and that goes with the game. But this chap was quite shocked, and I'm not surprised he was shocked. After a few months of this new online renaissance of my passion regarding the relationship between Islam and truth, I awoke one day to find my channel gone. My page deleted. No messages, no heads up or information as to what has happened. Twitter also deleted my account. After my initial surprise and frustration, I just accepted the situation with a salty attitude towards social media and a wary suspicion something rather deep and ominous goes on within those companies. I have voiced similar feelings, as I had the idea that my channel was being in some way blockaded. And then I felt like I was getting paranoid. But this chap had both Twitter and Facebook deleted, I assume, at the same time. So that in itself is a bit strange. Anyway, he said he just accepted it, and that was it. But then, about 3 weeks went by, and there was a knock on my door. 2 police officers very politely introduced themselves and asked if they could come in. Facebook, I said immediately. I just knew it. I really did make a pot of tea and biscuits, and we sat in my study as they produced these screenshots of some of my output. What were my intentions? Why do I get involved? What are my political affiliations? Do I belong to any particular groups? I showed them my academic qualifications, and they rummaged through my bookcase. I'm not sure they were allowed to do that, by the way, as I began explaining the passages that murdering the poetesses, the beheading of the Banu Qurayza, and rape of female captives are all Islamic sources. That's true. I even showed them some of the hadiths. They admitted they didn't have a problem with any of my comments, so I asked them why on earth then were they sitting in my house investigating me? They had been informed by a charity called Tell Mama, who had filed the original complaint to police that I might be using hateful speech to rouse opposition to Islam, claiming evidence white supremacists use these sort of tactics to rally support against Mohammedans. Hang on a minute, I'm going to do a cut here. All right, I wanted to bring up something about Tell Mama, just in case you don't know what that is. Tell Mama is an organisation founded by a Muslim spokesperson who, and it's a sort of central filing system where if you're a Muslim and you've been subject to some anti-Muslim incident, then you send it to Tell Mama and it's logged. And then the results are presented by Tell Mama to various news organisations saying, look, there have been X amount of incidents against Muslims in the past week or whatever. And this is the Telegraph article about it. This is quite old. This is 2013. Tell Mama got into some trouble. But hang on. The truth about the wave of attacks on Muslims after Woolwich murder. This was when a couple of Muslim men murdered a soldier in the street. Fayez Mughal runs a project called Tell Mama, which receives £2,000 and £14,000 a year from the government to monitor anti-Muslim attacks in Britain. in the wake of drummer Lee Rigby's murder, he has been understandably busy. This was written in 2013. I believe sometime later funding was removed from Tell Mama. I don't think it's got funding from the government now. So it says here, Tell Mama has no written definition of what it classes as an anti-Muslim incident, but has in the past adopted a wide definition. Last November, the crossbench Asian peer, Baroness Flather, told a newspaper it was pointless for the Conservatives to chase Muslim votes. They are all on benefits and all vote Labour. Tell Mama added this admittedly crass and untrue remark to its database as an anti-Muslim incident. Now, it's that sort of thing that they report. It says, again, lower down, fewer than 1 in 12 of the 212 incidents reported to Tell Mama since Woolwich, that's 17 cases, and then it says 8%, involved individuals being physically targeted. 6 people had things thrown at them, said Mr. Mughal, and most of the other 11 cases were attempts to pull off the hijab or other items of Islamic dress. Now, they could have happened, but it also has been known for girls to go home to their parents telling them that somebody pulled her hijab off, and they didn't. And nothing happened, and CCTV has revealed this. So some of them could have been, proper nasty incidents. I'm sure that not every white Briton is a perfect person. But Tell Mama started to classify almost anything as an anti-Muslim incident and bumping up the figures, and I think that's why they lost their funding in the end. Okay, so apparently Tell Mama filed a complaint to the police for this chap, suggesting that he was using hateful speech to rouse opposition to Islam, claiming evidence white supremacists use these sort of tactics to rally support against Mohammedans. So the upshot being the disturbing passages from genuine primary source material of Islam are not the problem, but the intentions of those who expound them are. It's not, as he explains, it's not the raping or torturing, but the person pointing it out. Neither officers had any knowledge of Islam beyond it being a religion, and when I suggested they ought to know by now, it dawned on me that even our own law enforcement and security forces really are unaware of the inherent dangers within its teachings. I want to add a caveat here. As we know, there are many people who are Muslim in the British Isles who are very respectable, kind and generous people. I do not for a minute believe that all Muslims feel the way that the Quran and the Hadiths have written things down. And indeed, if you look into the history of almost every religion, you'll find a lot of violence and prejudice and all sorts of things. But there really shouldn't be any problem about talking about these things. And my idea is that the reason some Muslims don't like talking about these things is they really feel that way, and that's the problem, and they're the ones who are the loudest. The other ones, they just keep quiet, of course. They don't want any trouble. The older officer was quite happy to leave me be and even asked me why the death threats didn't deter me. Why don't you investigate them, I asked. If Facebook and Tell Mama can find me, why not these people? I'm assuming, why not these people? I don't know which people he's talking about. I assume he means the the people who were threatening him. Why couldn't the police find them? And then he says, I keep up my studies, I keep within the law, the very law-abiding actually, yet here I am held as the guilty party of others' beliefs. Where do the likes of me go if these people get their way to silence us through intimidation? The older officer, and then he said the older officer was from the counter-terrorism unit. The older officer actually admitted there were big problems with current policies in dealing with hate crime reports. And the younger one said, why don't you just get a different hobby? So he then says he is in some way employed by the government, in some branch of the government, and he keeps his studies secret because, he says, the wokerati are ubiquitous in those departments. And then he said all the above is true, and he tells me the town he lives in and which police force was dealing with him. And as I said, the older policeman was from the counter-terrorism unit, the other was a young constable, and he said both very amenable, but so dim in regard to good and evil. All right, well, that was his communication with me. Make of that what you will. I can actually tell you that I have, well, as I said, I have studied Arabic and early Islamic history, and I know that there are many passages in the Quran and even more in the Hadiths which we would find objectionable in our modern society. There are two branches of Islam which have more or less ditched these ideas in the original Quran. They are regarded as historical curiosities but not to be taken seriously now, and that's the Ahmadis and the Ismailis. And so don't think that this is all the way through Islam. Unfortunately, in Britain we have a lot of Muslims who are from a sect called Deobandi, and they are particularly hardline, and that's why we get a particularly bad impression of how Muslims regard their own history. Right, well, that's it. Oh, yep, nearly forgot. I am Granny Optrix. I'm certainly not going to be monetizing this video, so I would appreciate you supporting my channel. I am very grateful for the generosity of some of my viewers. Astonishing. However, you don't have to contribute money. Just share and click like and make sure your subscription is still working, because as I said, especially YouTube keeps dropping subscriptions. Now, I am to be found on YouTube, on Rumble, on BitChute and on Minds.com, and I shall be talking to you again soon. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Granny Optrix design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.grannyoptrix.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.